This morning's scripture comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 through 25. Hear the word of the Lord. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I become all things to all men, so that by all means possible I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Well, it's our honor this morning to have Jordan McGrady with us. Jordan is serving with World Gospel Mission on the Texas-Mexico border, teaching physical education at a Christian elementary school. He's also coaching youth soccer and running adult basketball and volleyball leagues. He lived in Ecuador, as many of you know, during his high school when his parents, Ned and Marlene, were missionaries down there. And he graduated from Indiana Wesleyan in 2015, and he's back with us today. He's been here before with his parents. That was like 5 or 6 years ago, so we're glad to have you here, Jordan. So I want to give a round of applause as we welcome Jordan here.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here this morning, and I do have to say, before we get started, I am joining you guys with a little bit of a heavy heart. Though I was born at Foot Hospital here in Jackson, Michigan, my dad is from Southern Ohio, and he raised me as a Buckeye. And so, unfortunately,
we forgive you.
I'm sorry, I'm coming here. We got beat up last night, but we'll recover. Congrats to the yellow and blue team. That was a good game for them. Sorry, Michigan State. But it is great to be here with you guys in Michigan. It's been probably 5 or so years since we were here, if not possibly longer, but coming back this time, it's great being on my own. So the best place to start and really to get going is to start from the beginning. So looking back on my time and where we came from, as I said, I was born here in Michigan, right at Foot Hospital, and went to Western High School and Warner Elementary in the middle school up until I was 13 years old. And then at 13 years old, at that point, my older brother and sister had already left. They'd went off to college, and my parents came to me and they said, "Jordan, we really feel that God's calling us to become missionaries to Ecuador." I said, "Oh, all right. I don't really know much about Ecuador or any of that, but I'll make you a deal. If I can come back my senior year to be able to play basketball and hang out with my friends and graduate and all of that, then we'll do this. I'll go on this trip with you guys." So that's what we did. We were able to work it out schedule-wise. In 8th grade, I was in school Monday to Friday. Dad worked at Foot Hospital as a chaplain there. My mom worked as a counselor. And then on the weekends, we would travel around speaking at churches. Did that pretty much all throughout my 8th grade year. And that's how I started public speaking, how I started speaking at churches. Because at first I was a little 13-year-old chubby, shy kid. I didn't want to talk to anybody. You know, I would just sit in the pew, let Dad preach or let Mom talk. But then I noticed after a few Sundays in a row, I'd be at the table in the back and I'd get asked the same questions over and over and over again by 10, 15 different people. So finally I just got so sick of it. I said, "Dad, can I just get up and just let me talk? Let me answer. I know they're going to ask these questions. They're going to ask, how do you feel about going? What are you going to be doing for schooling? Do you know Spanish?" It's the same questions. And so I said, I already know the answers. Let me just get up and let me talk. Let me share. answer these questions, then I don't have to answer it 20 times in the back. So that's how it started. I had no intention of necessarily going into speaking or sharing in services. It was simply because I didn't want to have to repeat myself over and over again. Well, thankfully, I started that at 13. After about 100 churches, I think we spoke at about 105 churches as a family to raise support. We were able to go to Ecuador, but first, before we went to Ecuador, we actually went to language school in San Jose, Costa Rica. And so that was 9 months intensive language, but I was still in school. I had my 9th grade year, it was the beginning of my 9th grade year, so I still had to take all of the normal classes that you would take as a 9th grader. You know, your science and your English, the math, except for Spanish. Spanish was 1 hour a day, and the Spanish teacher did not speak a word of English. And I knew about 2 words in Spanish when I moved to Costa Rica. So that whole period was, for that 1 hour a day, was high intensity learning of Spanish. And if you got caught speaking in English, even to a classmate, your grade would get knocked down a little bit. So it was very good training for what would be coming next, which was when we went to Ecuador. And in Ecuador, there were no other Americans in our entire city. So we were living 10,000 feet up in Ricard, Ecuador, high up in the Andes Mountains. And there was 2 other missionary families there, but they were back doing this. They were back raising support when we got to the field. So it was literally just my mom, my dad, and myself living in Ecuador. We had a small church, maybe 5 or 10 people. If you guys remember back to when we were here, maybe last time my parents were here, my dad talks about 3 points, a bowl of chili, a soccer ball, and a carport. If that rings a bell with a sermon he gave. But it talks about how starting off, we all had very limited Spanish, but me through sports, my mom through cooking, and then my dad through preaching in broken Spanish, we were able to build a church in our own house up in the mountains in Ecuador, starting with 5 people, would come over for chili night. They didn't have chili in Ecuador, so we would make a big crock pot full of chili, and they would get a try chili for the first time. They're like, this is so good. We're like, we know. You guys should start making it too. It's delicious. And the food in Ecuador tended to be more on the bland side, so anything we would make that had flavor, they just absolutely loved. And so we were able to make friends, and people started coming over because we had food. And then I was able to make friends through sports. So growing up here in Michigan, it's changed a little bit, but especially when I was a kid, basketball, football, and baseball were the sports that everybody played. In soccer, we had AYSO. It was there on the side. I played 1 or 2 years of it, but it just was not the sport for me. I did not like the running. I played travel basketball, played basketball all throughout. Basketball was my main sport. I was always big, so I loved playing football, and then I enjoyed baseball as well. So those were the sports I played. Well, fast forward to Ecuador, they don't play any of those sports. The sports that they play are soccer and, surprisingly enough, volleyball. So I said, well, I have this free time. You know, I was doing online homeschool at the time, so I could get my schoolwork done in the morning, and I'd have the afternoons off. And so I said, well, what I'll do is I'll just go play soccer. So imagine this. You can picture this with me, all right? I was skinnier back then. I was still in high school, but I was already 6'2". Blonde hair, blue eyes, almost as white as you can be. Besides actually being albino, it's hard to get too much whiter than I am. And I was walking with a soccer ball down to our soccer field. By the time I got to the soccer field, there already was probably, I would guess maybe 5 to 10 on any given day, kids and teenagers behind me, just seeing who the big white guy walking to the soccer field with a soccer ball is. Because you see, in Ecuador, in the mountains, the average height, even for adults, is only about 5'5". And so me being 6'2", I was literally like this white giant, just placed in the middle of the mountains. And so I stuck out everywhere I went. And so not only did I look different, but my Spanish was slow, developing, getting started. And so I would just go out and play. Because here's the thing that's great about sports. You don't really have to talk as long as you know the rules. You can play sports as long as you know what's going on. And so for me, that was my way to connect with people. That was my way to build friendships and build relationships, was through sports. The sport of choice there, obviously, is soccer. Well, I only played 1 year of AYSO soccer, so I was not very good. And these kids grew up with a soccer ball on their foot. So they were incredible soccer players. Well, me being 15 or so, I had too much pride to let them run circles around me. The little 8 and 9-year-olds run circles around me. So I did what came naturally for me, which is the one position where you get to use your hands. You guys know which one that is? The goalie, right, the goalkeeper. The goalie is the only one that actually gets to use his hands in soccer. So to me, it made perfect sense, right? Between my wingspan, how tall I was, and I could actually catch the ball as if it was football or basketball. The ball comes, they kick it to you, you catch it. Makes perfect sense. So I started playing goalkeeper, and I realized I actually could do pretty well playing as a goalie, and through that, I was able to begin traveling around. I played in men's league as a 14, 15-year-old, playing goalkeeper there, and was able to make a lot of friends. A lot of teenagers would come out and play, and then afterwards, we'd invite them back to our house and do youth group activities, even though we weren't a church and we weren't a youth group. It was just hanging out with friends. And then eventually, through that, the parents would come and pick up their kids or come find out where their kids were at night, and they'd see we have a little sign up that said Iglesia Wesleyana Church, the Wesleyan church, and they'd ask, oh, are you guys a church? I said, well, not really, but every Friday night we'll have a bowl of chili and we'll talk for a little bit, and that's kind of how the church got started in Ecuador. People would come, the parents of my friends would come, and after a while of doing that, one lady goes, well, isn't church supposed to be on Sundays? What are we doing Friday nights? We're like, well, I guess you're right. Church can be on Sundays. So we switched from Friday night to Sunday morning. Mom started to make donuts. She did homemade donuts, which donuts do not exist in Ecuador. So once we started making donuts, attendance skyrocketed in our carport church, because this is something new. And I think in general, that's a pretty good rule of what I've noticed in church and in Christian gatherings. If you make food, people will come. So that is very true. Even in the Andes Mountains, don't worry, that rule is not broken. It's still true to this day. And so we started with maybe 5 or so people. And by the time we left Ecuador, 3 years later, we had not only outgrown our house with how many people were coming, we had to start doing church on the soccer field that we owned, because we couldn't fit everyone into our carport, into our garage area. And so it's so cool to see over 100 people by the time we ended up leaving Ecuador that were coming to this church. And it absolutely 100% had to be God, because we had mismatched plastic chairs. The music, I would just go onto YouTube and find Spanish Christian songs. That was our music. We didn't have a band. Dad's Spanish, he was preaching in Spanish. It was broken Spanish. So it wasn't anything that we did that took this church from 5 people to 100 people. It was all because people were there and God was moving in the mountains. So that was the experience that I came out of going into my senior year of high school. We moved back here to Jackson, and I went back to Western. Started playing basketball, or I guess first I played soccer on a Western soccer team, and then into basketball in the winter time. And at that point, I was planning on going to Indiana Wesleyan, but before that, I actually decided to return to Ecuador, but this time without my parents. So I got a little bit of taste of being a missionary on my own, because my parents at this point switched to World Gospel Mission, which is the mission agency that I'm with now, and they switched from global partners through the Wesleyan Church into their role now called member health. They're pastors to missionaries, if you remember them saying that. So they're actually, as an update, they're currently in Ireland right now, working with our missionaries in Ireland, providing counseling, providing pastoral care, learning about the work they're doing, and that's their job. They just got back from Albania. They still have the coolest job out of all the McGradys. Theirs is the one, like, one day I would love to have their job. They get to travel the world and just be pastors and be missionaries to people. And so that's where they are currently. But they started doing that work when I went back to Ecuador. I took a skipped semester, returned to Ecuador, and in Ecuador I was able to continue working with all those youth that I built the relationship with, continue working with our church there. And then I came back to the States and went to Indiana Wesleyan university, and at that time I had a plan in mind that I was going to go into business and make all of the money. And I'm going to make all of the money, and then I can help support other missionaries. That was Jordan's plan, right? I had it all planned out. I was going to go into marketing. I took a minor in Spanish, and I was going to go into different areas of sales and that type of work. And then I'll be able to make money, be happy, and I can support missions and support a local church. Well, after I graduated, I had a great time at Indiana Wesleyan. I graduated, I moved to Indianapolis, started out my career in the business world, and 2 years later, I worked for 4 different companies. 3 of them went under. They were startup companies. And by the fourth job, I was so sick of cold calling people and trying to set up meetings and making millionaires more money while I was barely making anything, that finally I said, God, this is not right for me. I've had all these super cool experiences, living in the mountains and being a missionary and seeing the way that you were able to work. Why? It just doesn't feel right that I'm stuck now at this cubicle making phone call after phone call just so I can make someone else money. This isn't right. This isn't what I'm supposed to do. But I didn't know exactly what it was that I was supposed to do at the time. And it was right after the 4th job, it didn't work out. I ended up quitting there. And a few weeks later, my parents called me up and they said, hey, we are having a field director retreat. All of the missionaries that WGM has, the field directors or the managers are coming into town. And remember the food thing, there's going to be a luncheon. And there's going to be this incredible luncheon there, all this different chicken and food, and we want you to come up. And I said, oh, free food when I'm unemployed? You absolutely take that offer. If someone's offering you free food when you don't have a job, you don't turn that one down. I said, all right, let's do it. This sounds great. So I went up, this was last summer, went up to Marion to our headquarters, and I started to interact with some of these missionaries. And I was playing volleyball. They had a volleyball net set up. And I was playing volleyball with a Bolivian and then American husband and wife couple. And I got to talking with them. I said, oh, what are you guys doing? Where are you? Making small talk. And said, well, we are on the Texas-Mexico border in a town called McAllen. It's like, oh, cool. My parents lived in Laredo on the border before I was born. My older brother and sister were born on the border. So, just talking to them about that. They go, yeah, we have an elementary school and we have a soccer program, and we really need someone that could come help teach at this elementary school, teach PE, and someone who would be able to help coach in the soccer program. And I said, oh, that sounds great. Good luck finding someone for that. Right over my head that they were asking if I wanted to come and help work with them and join the team. And so after a little while, they came back and talked to me some more, and they said, we think you could really be a good fit. God is telling us, and we feel like He's telling us to talk to you about possibly joining our team. And so I said, well, funny you should say that. My job I just had, I just quit it. I don't really have much going on right now, so I'll pray about it. I'll see what happens. Let me pray about it. So this was in June that we had the luncheon. By July, I prayed about it and realized, yeah, this is something that I want to do. August, I sent out a support letter, and by October 15th, I was able to go down to McAllen on a volunteer basis. So God absolutely provided for my first term. I went as a volunteer for a 9-month period, and went in blind. I did very little research. I had never been to McAllen before. I didn't really know much about it, but just like the same thing we did when I was in Ecuador, I said, all right, God, this is the way you're leading us. Let's see how it goes. Just trusting in God that, hey, if He's providing these doors and opening these doors, let's see how this goes. And so I moved down to McAllen and began teaching and coaching. So the story you can tell, or what you can see here, these are the kids that I coach for our soccer team. So in our soccer program, Texas, or Mexico, right on the border, is much like Ecuador. Soccer is obviously the main sport down there. And so we have a kids soccer program working with some of the other missionaries, and we have over 70 kids that participate in the soccer program. And so I coached the 8 and 9-year-olds, and I was very strategic in why I coach 8 and 9-year-olds, because they're young enough to not know I'm not great at soccer. I'm just big enough that they still think I'm good at soccer, but they're old enough that if I tell them to do something, they'll actually do it. So I chose that age group for a reason. They're actually really good about listening and following along. But what's interesting is, on the border, it is literally split 50-50 between English and Spanish. So I can go down the list here. Half of those kids speak Spanish fluently, half of the kids speak English fluently, and then there's one kid who only speaks English and one kid who only speaks Spanish. So it very much is bilingual, where I'll give instructions in English and then I'll have to give them in Spanish. Or I'll be coaching in English and then I'll translate it to Spanish. And the whole valley, the whole area down there is built that way, or that's how the culture is. So it's very different than Ecuador. Ecuador is 100% Spanish all the time. In McAllen, it's very much mixed between English and Spanish. So that's great. I love being able to use my Spanish. It still surprises everyone when I speak Spanish to them, because I'm about the last person you would suspect that can speak fluent Spanish to somebody. And so the kids always think it's so funny that Coach Jordan can speak Spanish. But it's great because I'm able to meet them where they're at. A lot of the parents don't speak any English at all, so I'm able to talk with the parents, work with them using Spanish from my time in Ecuador. So that kind of to get it started. The story I want to jump into is about this restaurant. And this restaurant is called Pollo Palenque. So I know we're getting kind of close to lunchtime. I hope you guys aren't too hungry. But this is Pollo Palenque and their chicken. So Pollo Palenque is one of the absolute best chicken restaurants down on the border. You can think of like a KFC or maybe a real good like home-cooked chicken restaurant. Well, this is the food that they have. And we go as a team, all of us missionaries, we go pretty often to this restaurant. And as we were going, they saw me, the people working there, and after a while they began saying, "Who are you? You look different than everyone else. Why are you here? What are you doing?" And through our times going and having lunch there, I was able to talk with them and say, "Oh, we're missionaries, and we have a kids soccer program, and we have an elementary school that I teach at." And the guy serving us said, "Do you have a men's league?" I said, we haven't really thought of doing a men's league before. We're so busy with kids, but we'll think about it. He said, "If you guys create a men's league, let us know, because we want to be a part of the men's league." And so we said, okay, and we called around. We knew enough people. It's not hard to find people that play soccer down in Texas and McAllen. So we sent out a flyer. I was able to use my marketing major that I have and make some flyers and make some tournament information. And we're able to get 4 teams signed up in this league, and keeping it pretty casual. Our soccer field isn't very big, so we play 5-on-5. And everyone else, the other teams, maybe match the color of their shirt, if that. Most of the time it was pretty just like a pickup, basketball shorts and a t-shirt. Well, Pollo Palenque, the very first game that they come, not only did they come as a whole restaurant wearing their clothes, but they all bought matching uniforms from Mexico. Went down into Mexico and they purchased these bright yellow banana-colored uniforms with their nicknames and numbers on the back of each uniform, while the rest of us are just in, t-shirts and shorts. And so they were serious about it. They were ready to come, ready to play. And so we're like, oh, okay, we gotta make this happen. This just went from a fun pickup game to an actual season. And so we were able to work with some of the other missionaries. We built out an entire season. We had playoffs. And I ended up playing for a team called the Gladiators and playing goalie because of my experience there. And we actually played Pollo Palenque in the championship game of the tournament in the springtime. That is Pollo Palenque receiving their second place trophies because we received the first place trophies. So not only do I stick out everywhere I go, but as the goalie, you wear a different color than everybody else. So not only do I look different, I'm also the one in the white shirt, in case you couldn't pick me out in the crowd. And so what's great about this team is a lot of us come from all over. So the guy in front of me is from Ireland, and he's there he's there working as a PE teacher. And the guy to my left there is a missionary as well, Nathaniel Summers. And then there's people from Mexico, there's people born in McAllen. It's English and Spanish going back and forth all the time. And it's just such an incredible way to build these relationships and get to know these people through playing sports. Because when you work with someone and play with them on a weekly basis, you really get to know what's going on. And so fast forward into the summertime. Does anyone remember this past summer what happened sports-wise?
World Cup.
The World Cup, absolutely. So for us, it's not a big deal. The World Cup, Team USA, we didn't even make the World Cup. 32 teams, I think, 32 make the World Cup. USA as a country was not one of them, so we really, really don't care. But Mexico did make it, and Mexico really, really does care about the World Cup. And so I got this great idea, right? I had this idea using my marketing brain. I said, let's do an event for the World Cup. The games were being played in Russia. So for us in McAllen in Central Time, the games were like 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning for the whole month of June. And so I had an idea. Every Saturday of the World Cup, 4 Saturdays, we will have an event. And we'll invite all of the kids who play in our soccer league. We'll invite the kids from the school. We'll invite the men who play in the men's league. And we'll all come together and we'll have a time to watch the soccer game. We'll open up the soccer field so they can play, have water because it's 105 degrees out there, have water balloons and things, things going on. And so I said, let's do it. All coming together for the final championship game, which was on a Sunday. And I said, that Sunday we should do a big event. So the first 4 Saturdays were just events, community events, safe place for people to come. But the Sunday I wanted to do something special. And so I went to Pollo Palenque, probably not great timing on my part, because I went to Pollo Palenque after we had just beat them in the championship game. But I went to them, I said, hey guys, this is my plan, this is what we're trying to do. Is there something that you guys would be able to do to help us for this event? We're planning on having maybe 50 to 100 kids and parents come to watch the World Cup game. Is there anything that you would be able to do so that we'd be able to have this event and provide food for these people? And so Pollo Palenque actually ended up donating for that event 150 pieces of chicken for the event, completely for free, because they saw what we were doing. They saw the impact that we were having in their own community, the way we were working with these students, working with these kids, providing a safe place for them, and they liked what we did. Now here's the best part. Here's the part that I think is really cool. This picture here, the guy right here in the blue, that's Pastor Juan. Now Pastor Juan grew up in McAllen. He speaks English and Spanish fluently, and he works in jails. He works in prisons doing prison ministry. So he is very good at talking to people, meeting them where they're at. He talks to some people that have done some pretty bad things. And so we asked Pastor Juan, we said, hey, will you come and before the World Cup games start at 11 o'clock, will you give a little sermon? So we scheduled it out. In the morning at 9 a.m., we had a rematch, my championship gladiators team versus Pollo Palenque on that Sunday morning. Then, before we had lunch, before the soccer game at 11, Pastor Juan got up and he was able to preach. This is the front yard of my house. He was able to preach in the front yard to not only the kids of our soccer program, and not only to my soccer team gladiators, but also to Pollo Palenque. And they were able to hear, probably a lot of them for the first time, about Jesus and to hear the story on the front yard, much like how we did it in Ecuador. There's no fancy church building. These are old chairs that used to be the classroom chairs with the arm that comes down. But he was able to preach perfectly in English and Spanish, true to the style of the valley, because many people on Pollo Palenque only speak Spanish. And so he was able to share a message. They were able to hear the gospel the same day that they provided all of this food and were able to play with us. So it was such a great experience to see all that coming together of how God was able to work and use the experience I have from starting in Ecuador, learning how to play soccer, learning how to speak Spanish, into my business background of doing marketing and learning how to do promotional events like that, and build these relationships and build these connections, because that's what's so great about where we're located is even though it's third world in mindset and in poverty level, there still are businesses that are able to help and provide down there. So my work, on top of teaching PE and on top of being a soccer coach and running the sports leagues, is actually to do networking, do business connections with local businesses, just like Pollo Palenque, to provide for the people in the area. Because these kids that we're working with, the parents that we're working with, are the absolute poorest of the poor, coming in from Mexico, coming in from Guatemala. A lot of them are working 2 or 3 jobs to get by, so anything that we can do to provide a meal for them. We give scholarships all the time. Over 80% of the kids in the soccer program are on scholarship. And so we're able to work with them and provide what we can to help out, all in the name of Jesus, all for the purpose of, we're not trying to make money. None of us are getting rich off of this. We're simply doing this as an avenue, a way to connect with people, to ultimately build these relationships up and share the gospel. Because that's what, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And it doesn't matter the style that you do it. It doesn't matter if you're like my dad, who was a chaplain in a hospital, or if you're a preacher in front of a church, or if you're playing soccer with kids on the street, or if you're a teacher or work in business. Just like the message you gave to the kids, we all have that responsibility of telling people about Jesus. So for me, the avenue that I have found is simply is through sports. And that's simply because that's my background, that's my experience, and that's the way I'm able to connect best with others to build up those relationships. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity. It's so great to see how God has been able to move and work not only on the border, but in my life to prepare me along the way. Looking back 10 years ago, as a chubby little 13-year-old, I would have never thought that I'd end up on the border playing soccer. If you told me soccer is the sport I would have been playing, I probably would have laughed at you, because basketball was my favorite sport and still is. But God can use anybody at any time to advance His message and to reach people. And so for me, my goal the next 2 years, I want to return back down to McAllen. I'm shooting for January to get back down there for 2 reasons. One, start of the new year and new semester at the elementary school. So I'm teaching PE there every Monday, and right now they're just having subs fill in for me until I'm able to get back down there. So I want to get back at least by the start of the second semester so that I'm able to continue coaching and teaching at the school. The kids soccer program, the spring semester is when they play games, play tournaments. We got second place last year, my team did. So I told them I want to be back this year so that we can actually go for first place. And so that's my goal. It's going to take a lot of help. It's going to take churches like you guys and people like you who get missions, who have supported missionaries. The McGradys as a family, can't thank you guys enough for all the work you've done, all the giving that you do, and ultimately that's the way we're able to do what we're able to do. My business mind, what I studied in school, this model, it doesn't really make sense. If I created a business and this was the business model, nobody would invest in it. But we know that God's message in scriptures is not a business model. If He's in it, He will provide. And it's only through Him and only through the support and the hearts that you guys have for helping others that we're able to do what we do. And so, lastly, I'm going to leave you with the verse of the day, what we've been talking about a lot, 1 Corinthians 9:25. And this actually comes from the Message Bible, which is one of my favorite versions of the Bible. But 1 Corinthians 9:25, all good athletes train hard. They do it for gold medal that tarnishes and fades. Year after one, that's gold eternally. So here is This is actually the medal that we give out to all of the kids that participate in our soccer program. And that Bible verse is written in Spanish on the back of it. And so when I'm coaching and when I'm working with these kids, we want to emphasize the importance of training. We want to emphasize why we do what we're doing as far as the soccer side goes, as far as why we have to run laps and why we have to practice with our left foot, why we have to work as a team, and why it's important to build up your teammates instead of blaming them, and all the lessons that come with playing sports. And I say, this right here is why we do all of that, right, for this medal. But there's something so much more important than this little plastic medal. And that's what we all need to be after, is we need to focus on what's really important. Focus on a gold medal that doesn't tarnish, that doesn't fade, that's always there. And then I'm able to talk and share with them about Jesus and who he is throughout practices, using this verse as the jumping off point to talk about why we're doing what we're doing. So it's only because of people like you guys up here in Michigan who allow me to do the work I'm doing in Texas on the border. If you want, the best part is we still are stateside. So if you ever want to come down and visit, you don't need a passport to see where we are. We have a guest house. We have a lot of space available. If you are a teacher, you want to work at our elementary school, we have about 40 kids, preschool through 6th grade there. If you like to play sports and want to come help out on the soccer field, you can do that. And then I also run a men's basketball league and a co-ed volleyball league as well. All just ways of reaching out into the community, building relationships, and ultimately getting to share the gospel with people. So that's essentially where I'm at now. I mean, as far as what you guys have done to support us, we can't thank you enough. Love everything that you're doing. I appreciate you allowing me to come here and talk with you some more. I think everyone had got one of my prayer cards in the bulletin. On there, I think I have my Facebook, and that's the best way to keep up with what I'm doing. I try to post videos, try to post pictures on there as much as possible. And if you want to become a prayer supporter on that, you're able to check a box on the back. It's a tearaway there. You can check a box and let me know you're praying for us. And if you want to receive my newsletter in an email, you can write your email in there as well, or check Facebook. And if God's calling you to join the team financially, it takes a whole team to do the work that we do. Just like in soccer, I can be the best goalie in the world. If there's not someone scoring goals, we're going to lose the game. And it's the same thing with mission. I can be the best missionary in the world. It takes an entire team behind me to do the work that we do. So if you guys want to join in financially with that as well, I'd greatly appreciate it. Love this time being able to come here and share with you. And I'll be in the back if you have any questions, and I would love to talk to you. So thank you guys so much.
Hold up, Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's pray for Jordan before we go any further. Father, we're just so thankful how you have called Jordan and his family to this work. And it's just wonderful to see how, through those experiences, how you have formed a heart that is open to you and to anything that you would have for him. And so we're excited that he has this opportunity to go back to McAllen and to serve down there. And we just pray for him that you continue to build up his passion first and foremost for you, and then for those kids and folks he's going to be with down there. And Father, we pray for him as he does his fundraising support, that you would lead people to support, to be perhaps monthly givers, that he would know that he has financial backing and has support from all of us up here in the cold northern part of the U.S., supporting him. And so if there's anyone among us today, Father, that you might be calling to do that, we pray that they would answer that call that you're placing on them. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, give Jordan a round of applause.